My name is Maria Sascha Khan. I was born in Montana, in a very small town. I was born in Pine Creek and raised for the first years of my life in Prairie. There's about 10 houses.
Montana!
Yes. And I love Montana. From there, I went on to pursue a career in ballet as a professional ballet dancer. I graduated from school in Monaco, and I then went on to dance with the state ballet companies of Berlin and Munich, as well as a principal dancer in Russia. And I'm now based in London. I have 3 other siblings. They're also all classical ballet dancers, and we're all from Montana. So that's short.
There's also another distinction. Share with us about your brothers and
Yes.
yourself in terms of not only for Montana, but really a first for the United States.
Yes, so my brother Julian McKay is the first American to graduate from the Bolshoi Ballet Academy with a full Russian diploma. He graduated at just 17, normally he'd graduate at 18 or 19. And he's now the youngest soloist of the Mikhailovsky Theater in St. Petersburg. So he's actually sort of made a lot of firsts in history, so that's been exciting to see from the beginning, since I'm the eldest. And my brother Nicholas went to the Bolshoi Ballet Academy at 9, so he's the youngest American to ever attend the academy. They didn't realize, I think, that he was American when they first took him. And they're both fluent in Russian. And then my sister Nadia, she dances with the Rome Opera Ballet in Italy. She's the only non-Italian ballerina in the company, so she's learned Italian very quickly.
So I say, thank you, Montana. Welcome.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
If you would, please, Chan.
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Chan Hongo. I was born in Beijing, China, but my family immigrated to Vancouver, Canada when I was a little girl, and it was the late 70s. Vancouver was very different in those days. My parents founded the Go Ballet Academy where I trained. As a young girl, I was one of the only Chinese girls to study ballet. And went on to build my career with the National Ballet of Canada. I've had the privilege to dance all around the world with various companies and explore different roles. But I come from a dance family, and I think not only my parents, but my uncle and my aunts as well have made their footprint in the world of dance in the US as well as in Asia.
Very nice, thank you. Rasta?
I was born Rasta Kuzma Ramachandra, which is a pretty big name. My stage name is Rasta Thomas. I was born in San Francisco, grew up in Saudi Arabia. Both parents are physicians. I got into dance because I was being rude and disrespectful in martial arts class. It was actually Taekwondo, to be exact. And my dad said, if you don't improve your behavior, I'm gonna put you in ballet class. And I didn't want to go to ballet class. At the time, I did not like girls. I thought they had cooties. And then I started to appreciate dance, all the beautiful girls in class with me. Started to watch Michael Jackson videos, Gene Kelly videos. Did a few competitions. Traveled the world, been to about 50 countries. Big shout outs to my big brother, late Patrick Swayze. Did a movie with him, made a Gap commercial. Had the honor of meeting Michael Jackson. Have a beautiful daughter named Anami Halo. And I'm very happy to be in Montana for the first time. So thank you.
I'd like to this is a quote from you, and I think it's just very telling, because the people we've met, there's, as I said earlier, the one constant is Montana blows them away, and it's the people. And what you said is Montana's a place of beauty, openness, freedom, a place where you feel your soul can fly. I know from my own experience that every time my family and I have brought back ballet professionals to Montana, whether to perform, teach, or visit, it's been love at first sight, and they beg to come back. So there's nothing more to say. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
I'm done.
Drive safe.
Yeah, sure. I'd like to start, Jan, I was talking to you earlier this evening. Your parents came over from China, and I got the impression they didn't leave voluntarily, that this was something that either through cultural repression, economic. Give us a little background. What was going on that these very esteemed people left their home country and came to Vancouver, British Columbia?
Yes, it's fascinating because I think our topic is how art breaks down walls. And my parents were established principal dancers with the National Ballet of China. This was in the early 70s. They were doing revolutionary ballets at the time during the Cultural Revolution. And when they had me, my grandparents came to visit. But the turning point in their life was when my grandfather fell ill, and my father was not allowed to go and visit him, and subsequently couldn't say goodbye to his father before he died. And this was an awakening because he finally realized that as an artist, as a human being, he had lost his freedom. He had lost his freedom to grow, and he's lost his freedom to reunite with his family. So it was at that point, and after having me, that they wanted a different life. And so it was a long process of paperwork, and they started an immigration process to Canada where we had my aunt sponsor us. I was 8 years old when we immigrated to Vancouver. They were unknown. They were trying to learn English, and in a community where I went straight into grade 2, being the only Chinese girl in my class. It was very, very different. And to tell people that you're ballet dancers from China was really odd. You know, ballet is a Western art form, and you're coming from China. How would you know, and what can you teach us? What can you do? It was a lot about proving themselves, and then the walls started to come down.
So when we're talking about, as the subject entails, how to break down walls, there's social walls. We've heard many stories from people here tonight in terms of what they faced, what they overcame. There's the political walls that people also, in the case you're describing with China, and then there's economic issues too that affect people. So you said your grandfather, your dad was not allowed to see him. Was this in China?
No.
Where was your grandfather?
So thank you for taking us back to that. My grandfather lived in Singapore.
Okay.
So my father was an overseas Chinese who had gone to China to study dance. Dance was what brought him there, as well as his cultural heritage. The Russians had set up school in Beijing, China, and he was fascinated to learn from them, as well as to get back to his roots.
Right. Okay, so we then transition. You come to Canada, and you mentioned that there were some challenges. Tell us a little bit about what those challenges were, besides being somebody that didn't speak the language and being of a different origin, and you're talking about, you know, unfamiliarity with your background from their perspective. So what were some of the things that you ran into?
I think
And how did you deal with this going forward? Just briefly tell us, please.
you know, as a young girl, not knowing a word of English and wanting so much to express, the constant in my life was dance. But I didn't know a step of dance. I wasn't privy to dance in China because there were only state-run schools at that point in time. Not now, there's tons of ballet schools now, but at that point in time, only state-run schools, and you had to be age 11 to get in. So being a 7, 8-year-old, there was no dance classes for me, but I watched and I knew dance and I loved to dance. I loved music. Now, being uprooted and going into Vancouver, dance was the constant. So, but the challenges were, how do you make it in dance? There were no examples, you know. Was there anybody in a company of Asian heritage? Was there anybody to look up to? There weren't any examples.
Okay. So I'd like to just ask Rasta, your interesting background. You're born in San Francisco, you live in Washington, you go to Saudi Arabia. Not exactly a straight line in terms of commonality. Two parents as physicians. So where does this kind of juxtaposition for you kind of come into play? Besides the fact that you were going to get kicked out of your martial arts and sent to have to go to ballet school with the girls who you didn't like. And could somebody please explain to me cooties? We did the same thing in the schoolyard. Get away from the girls, they have cooties.
Feels like chicken pox.
Okay, all right. Just don't touch me, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so give us a little, in terms of, you're in Saudi Arabia, Muslim country, Middle East, very foreign from your background. Give us a little insight in history, what's going on there?
We had these international compounds, so you could pretty much do Western dancing or Western activities on the compounds, and my dad found this British teacher to kick my butt in ballet class, and we didn't think much of it after I've been taking it for a little while. We left right around Desert Storm, 1990. We moved back to the States, to DC. And then my dad saw an article in the Washington Post that said, you know, opening of a ballet academy called the Kirov Academy of Ballet. And he took me down there and I got a full scholarship. And he's like, they're gonna feed you and they're gonna take care of you and teach you ballet? This is great. Stay with it. So I didn't quite fall in love with ballet. I was just really good at it. So I liked the adoration, I liked the attention. I liked dance for all the wrong reasons for a while. It took me around the world, and it wasn't until much later that I realized it was actually an art form that, you know, allowed me to be greater than just a technician and to find moments in my life that paralleled the ballet I was doing, whether it be Prodigal Son or Apollo or Le Jeune Homme et l'Amour, these different ballets that could actually, I could identify with and feel greater than I was as a human.
So when you're talking about your experience, both of you are very, is it fair to say, classic ballet in terms of teaching and still your, the profession. So do you see any crossover with your work that moves into his direction, or has it been more within the framework of your classical training and background? If you would, Maria.
One of the great things that I love about what's happening now in ballet companies is that you have to be very well-rounded. So in my personal experience, I've been blessed to work with a wide range of choreographers from extremely modern to contemporary neoclassical, and you have to be very diverse. So it's changed a lot, actually, even from when I graduated from school, where instead of just classical ballets being done in a classical ballet company, you're actually doing every sort of style you can imagine. It's not, you're not necessarily doing hip hop or tap or jazz. You're usually modern, neoclassical, those kinds of things, but you have a chance to explore other ways of moving besides the traditional classical syllabus.
So when we're talking about breaking down walls, can you, in the context of globalization and how people travel and interact, can you look back, say, 30, 40 years ago and come to the present and see how dramatic, because of how people have exposure now on many different levels with the advent of technology and such, bringing the world much closer together, you as a long-standing teacher, what have you been able to see in terms of globalization, as an example, breaking down some of these barriers and allowing some of this crossover?
I think definitely it comes to acceptance. I think the integration and acceptance, because art is reflected of human life and human emotions, whereas when you talk about 30, 40 years ago, it was still reflecting of emotions, but it was so categorized and almost pigeonholed. And so you had your various genres and you had to keep specific to those. You know, there was no crossover, but now there is so much innovation, and the innovation comes from people crossing over and being influenced, and its acceptance and creating new things.
And it's all on YouTube.
Yes. Well, and that's part of the technology. It's
Exactly.
instantaneous. I looked all of you up on YouTube, was blown away just watching your performances, and I was commenting to Rasta that as a person with martial arts background that he has, I could see a lot of that in his, at least in a couple of the YouTubes I saw, in his dance. So that infusion is very much there. Maria, you know, you're talking about Russia, a country that the world really thinks of in terms of ballet.
And caviar.
And caviar.
And vodka.
You could go on with a few
Aren't
other
that
things.
artistic, though?
Yeah. Yeah. So when you're talking about that type of infusion, crossover, is that starting to, or has that already been happening within the Russian ballet world, or is that still very traditional?
Are you talking about as far as the styles within the companies,
I'm
or their
talking about what
openness?
the influence is coming from the outside may be.
Mm-hmm.
Have there been attempts to maintain
Yes,
a
there
degree
has.
of purity?
Yes.
And is that causing issues and friction within some of the arts communities as they
Yes.
want to expand?
Yes, it is actually. There's, even within the Bolshoi theater, I think there's, you could say almost two separate groups. There's a group that is a little more traditional. They'd like to stick to the classics and then have less contemporary, less new works coming in. And those who think it's important to move forward. The struggle comes at still preserving, of course, the heritage of, in this example, of the Bolshoi theater and of the Bolshoi school. I think it is difficult. When my brothers went, for example, they were the only foreigners to be placed, the only Americans to be placed in the lower level of the school. And that was because at that point they were taking a few foreigners into the upper academy, and but they had a whole separate class for them. So we say that it was kind of an experiment perhaps on their part. They did very well at it, my brothers anyway. And it was interesting even for them because they grew up with all Russians as their friends. So they grew up speaking Russian fluently, and a lot of their friends didn't have any idea what it was like in the US and had a very different perspective on what it was actually like. And for them to grow up with my brothers, I think even just that alone opened their mind to the possibilities of what they themselves could do in just, the world. As far as the ballet goes, I found it very interesting to see that the, I guess, feeling of freedom that they grew up with coming from Montana, they were able to use that when it came time for, like I said, it's more recent, so they recently incorporated contemporary classes, even into the Bolshoi Academy. And it was interesting to see that even though they grew up with the very traditional training, they were able to still be very free in the contemporary class. And I see it starting to catch up within the companies there. When I was working in Russia as well, I see that perhaps because traditionally for so long it has been very classical and it has been quite closed as far as having even foreigners accepted into companies in general in Russia and having foreign choreographers come in. So you see it happening, but hopefully they can still keep the classical side to it as well.
And I think about this in terms of breaking down walls, the political side. Is there concern if it's state-sponsored? And please educate me, in Russia, is it still a very much state-sponsored type of art?
It
so
is.
With that, what goes with that type of state sponsorship? And then I want to ask you, from your parents coming from China, especially at the time they left. We'll go from there and forward, but please, if you would.
It's a wonderful thing that, in a way, that it's state-sponsored because they have the full funding that they need. In the States, it's funded very differently. You have to find a lot of private sponsors. So, of course, that means that there is perhaps more of an influence as well from the state when that is the person that is sponsoring it. And they're very proud of their heritage. They're very proud of ballet. It's a very iconic thing. I know for my brothers even, in the States, it's different because it's not so much a part of our culture and our heritage. So when they come back even to the US, it's always very interesting for them even to educate people. I found that myself as well, that in Russia they would speak to the taxi drivers, for example, and they would immediately be blown away that they were at the Bolshoi Ballet Academy.
Right.
And I've had the same in Europe as well. And so it's more because they have that within their system, and I think that is because it's been state-sponsored for so long. All the beautiful theaters are as well. Politically, yes, perhaps they have more influence then. Yes.
If I'm giving you the money,
Yeah.
I'm probably going to ask you what I would like in return.
To a certain extent, yes. Definitely. Yeah.
And Chan, would you share some of your experiences and understanding of China compared to 30 years ago? When you mentioned parents doing revolutionary ballets, to me that screams, this is what you're going to do. So what has changed in China in the last several decades as it's opened up to the West as it references ballet and the arts?
Well, I have to first say that I'm not an expert when it comes to living and working in China, but my perceptions from visiting many times and having exchanges is that it's a whole different story now. it's opened up so much, and they really embrace innovation and creativity. They are, I believe, trying to find their own voice within the ballet world. What makes the National Ballet of China different from the Royal Ballet, from the Bolshoi Ballet. And I think it's with that in mind that they will find their identity with the cultural background that they bring and the years of history. So many new ballets have been created based on historical legends, famous novels, themes that the Chinese people, the Chinese audience can relate to, but all with a newer vocabulary, new compositions of music. So there's a definite movement, and there's workshops now for new choreographers. So a lot of avenues to explore, and they really want to fast track that. This is what I perceive.
So this is a very good example of the voice that art gives to social change that's taking place. And sometimes it's happening, we're not paying attention to it until you look back. Rasta?
Business is international. Everyone likes to make money. That sees no borders. Art is talent. Talent is exciting. Talent transcends boundaries. Perfect examples are food. We all like Chinese food. We all like Indian food. We all like Ethiopian food. Cars. We all like nice cars. If there's a choreographer in Antarctica and they're really amazing and no one has ever seen them yet, someone will find them and bring them all over the world. Art attracts because it's talent. You can't take talent away from anybody. It's from your soul, and it's what we're here to do.
So I'd like to just stop at the moment. Any questions, please, from the audience? Please.
What were you listening to in your headset?
Eminem. Eminem.
Whatever helps him with his groove. Any questions, please? Okay. We'll continue.
I'd like to give a big shout out to Gregor and Charlene for making this happen. Bringing me here to meet you fine people. It seems like we lost a few, but I think we can make do without them. They weren't the fun ones.
We'll carry this through. So, you grew up in Montana. I can't ask you this question, but first visit to Montana, Rasta?
Absolutely.
Okay, first visit, second visit. So as we're talking about impressions of going other places, what are your impressions of Montana? What preconceived notions did you have possibly? Now you've been here before, but did you have preconceived notions of what Montana would be? I certainly did in 1972 when I got off the train and was surprised the roads were paved. I was going to college, and then I asked myself, where do you think you were going if you're going to college and the roads aren't going to be paved? So a little reality shock. So anything along those lines that you may have had some impressions before you did arrive here?
I'll say one thing, you say one thing. Ready?
You go first.
Moose.
Mountains.
Cabins.
Ranch.
Snow.
Cowboys.
Mountains.
Oh my gosh, you're too fast. No, but openness. And the first time when I came, which was January of last year for Vibe, you know, it was so apparent from the moment that we were met at the airport, the hospitality and the genuine kindness of the people here. And I'm very appreciative.
I've been getting rides every day from people I don't know.
Right.
It's amazing. It's like I feel like hitchhiking is great. I get to know them after, but anywhere I want to go, I just put my thumb out and they'll pick me up in the snow. It's amazing.
The only reason we're picking you up because if the car gets stuck, we need somebody to help get out of the snow.
There you
so
go.
I just want to clear that up right now for you, okay? Yeah.
But Russia's the same way with hitchhiking too. Montana and Russia.
Yeah.
Russia's amazing with that, mostly because you have gypsy taxis everywhere and you meet amazing people. You have engineers that are, you know, working in Siberia in the oil fields, but they're driving you to the Bolshoi.
Right. So tell us a little, you know, you grew up in Montana, but you've got this incredible worldly exposure. So fair to say your parents were the drivers of this? What did they give to you
They gave me the confidence and the drive to believe that whatever you wanted to achieve with your life was possible, and to find whatever special gift you had within yourself and use that in order to help other people. And you can do that at any age. You don't have to wait till you're old. That's what I was always taught. So that's been what it's always been the, I guess, driving force behind all of our achievements. It's for that.
They gave her genetics. Look at that. Come on. Look at that.
The question was, are your parents still alive? Yes.
Yes. Yes. My mom has spent a lot of time in Russia because my brothers went there at 9 and 11. We're not, I mean, the only way they could go is if she went, and it kind of went on a 6-month trial period, a 6-week basis of like, okay, I guess we'll stay another 6 weeks. And it ended up being 6 years. So, yes.
And I've got to ask you, Maria Sascha Khan. Maria we think of as a Spanish name. Sasha I would think of as Russian, and Khan. So where did we get that combination?
So my grandfather's Indian.
Okay.
So I grew up from a young age going to Malaysia and Singapore, where my half of my family is. So even though I was born and raised in Montana, and I was in a very small town, I guess you could say, I did have a chance to still see the world and to travel a little bit. So from a young age, I knew that there were other things outside of Montana. And I had a sort of, my education wasn't traditional in the way that I learned everything from sitting in a desk. Mm-hmm. I was partially homeschooled. I was also partly Montessori trained. And I found this to be extremely important because, especially if we're talking about how art breaks down walls, if you yourself have walls up around you and your thinking and what you think is possible even for yourself to achieve, there's only so far you're going to go. So a lot of that, even as far as history goes, I learned a lot of history from going to the places and actually seeing them, and it was much more interesting that way as well.
Right. Jane, share one story with us to a place that you've been to, that you went there for purpose of dance, and it was totally unlike what you had expected it to be. And where did your art maybe open up some doors or bring people into your life in the most unexpected way?
Wow. Many different examples. But you know, I think when I was younger, having the opportunity to tour, it was our first time touring to Japan. And we brought several different repertoire pieces with us, and I think we opened in Osaka. And so, you know, dancing a soloist part, very young in the company, and the audience was very quiet. And we thought, this program is not going well at all. They're not liking us at all, you know, to a dead silence until the end of Act 1, where the applause exploded and people stood up, and you know, and from then on we knew it's a different type of respect, it's a different culture, and this is how they showed their appreciation. So at the end of that performance, you know, we had crowds waiting at the stage door, and we felt like celebrities walking out, and ended up meeting many people who follow the dancer's career, and then having come back to the country to perform many times after that, keeping in touch with these people. It was all through the love of dance and the common language, and them being very interested in what you were doing in your career in Canada or with that company. So that was fantastic.
Thank you. Rasta?
I had similar experience in Japan. Yeah, I would agree. That's a good one. I'd have to say India. When I performed in India with my company at the time called Bad Boys of Dance, we had grown accustomed in Europe to dancing for predominantly women. In fact, I would probably say 75% of the people that come to the ballet are women and 25% are men, generally. However, there are exceptions to every rule, but most have reluctant husbands or reluctant partners that they want to take, and they don't really want to go. And I've always felt that the biggest compliment you could get was from someone's husband saying, "You did a good job." Because then you knew you really did a good job. Otherwise, you probably did a terrible job. But in India, we did this mall show in the mall, in the center of this mall, and there were just a lot of guys around. And then we realized, well, maybe women don't come to the mall. And then we we went to do our first show, and like 90% of the audience was all women, all men, sorry. And it was a little strange because we had this one Chippendale-esque number to Fred said, right, I'm sexy, I'm too sexy. Mm-hmm. And it just felt so awkward dancing to all these Indian men. And it's not that it was weird, but believe it or not, by the end, they came down to the stage and they were dancing with us and they were doing their Bollywood moves and they were just really having a good time. And I was so excited because I knew it transcended countries, but I thought it was just for the female population. But then I realized it transcends cultures for also the male population. So it was quite exciting.
Thank you. Maria? Any type of similar story in terms of having been someplace that just completely was not what you expected?
When I was on tour in Oman, that was a very interesting one. Their culture doesn't have ballet in it at all. And the Sultan of Oman, he's a very big supporter of the classical arts. And he built a beautiful theater there. And they started inviting all the top companies to come and perform there. And before we went, we got a 2-page list of the things that you're not allowed to do. So everyone was a little bit hesitant.
2 pages?
Yeah, 2 pages in small print. So we were, so everyone was a little bit like, okay, this tour is not going to be fun. I was dancing in Germany at the time, where the weather's generally not that great. And so everyone was excited about the sunshine, and then after the 2 pages, everyone was like, okay, I don't know if I want to go anymore. And that was one of the biggest surprises I've had, actually, is performing there, because our preconceived notion was going to be that everyone was going to be very unfriendly, nobody was going to help us or talk to us, and that we were going to just have to like stay in the hotel. And the locals were so friendly. They were very curious to know about ballet. They're still trying to find out how to incorporate it into their culture. For example, we were doing Romeo and Juliet, and you have a cross on the stage because she goes to speak with the friar, and they requested that the cross be removed, and they asked if the girls could maybe wear a little longer dresses,
A little more coverage.
a little bit more.
Yeah.
But in general, they were very interested to see it and to learn about it, and they were so friendly, taking us out into the desert to see where they have all the camels and the wadi, they call it, where the water goes through the desert. So that was one of them. Yeah, I was very surprised by the receive.
I'm curious, in the fine print, what were the do-nots besides coverage?
Well, just certain rules of behavior and, yes, ways of dressing. It's very typical, I think, for a predominantly Muslim country, so no holding hands. Just in general, like, don't speak loudly, these kinds of things, of just to be very respectful and follow the rules of the culture.
As Rasta was talking about, mostly a lot of women will go to the ballet. Correct me if I'm wrong, but growing up in certain areas in certain parts of the country, it's not very manly to be dancing, unless it's kind of some kind of shuffling along and a line dance, whatever we do. So I'm thinking, you are athletes. You are finely tuned, trained athletes. I'd like you to share what the physical demands on your person are. What type of training regimes do you go through? And I think once people have seen somebody perform as you do, you come away going, wow, yeah, it's not two guys colliding on a football field, but you try jumping, holding that pose, doing the things that are so amazingly beautiful. So if you would, share just the physical demands of your profession.
I think the common perception is, it looks so light and airy and graceful, and the better you do your performance, the easier and effortless it is. Mm-hmm. So I went to a dentist one time, and I told him that I was a ballet dancer, and he goes, so what do you do during the day? So
I've heard that a lot.
You've heard that
right?
a lot.
Well, nothing, I sleep.
Right.
But You know, what you were asking, the number of hours of training and dedication, and how it actually is a lifestyle that, you know, everyone is different, but potentially what you will be eating that day because you're getting ready for a performance, you know, the number of hours of your sleep, or, you know, your routine to best set yourself up for the best performance. Or even if it's not a performance, if it's just a regular training day, you know, to know, okay, I'm going to be working for 6 hours, you know, what does my body need, the nutrition aspect, and now in my role as a mentor and teacher, you know, to be able to pass that on, but also to reiterate the importance of, you know, the demands on one's body to make it last, because, you know, we are doing repetitive movements over and over again, and one injury sets you back for so many weeks or months at a time that it could be detrimental to progress.
And along those lines, with the competitiveness, what I've seen is your profession is viciously competitive. So an injury takes you from up here to watching back there. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, and you feel like everybody's moving forward while you're going backwards, you know, and you feel very helpless. And I think working with young people and even professionals, you know, an injury is really hard on the psyche. Emotionally, it's very difficult. So having good resources, having a great support system is vital.
All right. Rasta?
Injuries are vacations, if you're lucky enough to recover. Otherwise, they're the end of your career. So it's either a vacation temporarily where you can read and study and grow as an artist and then come back stronger, or you're out and you go back to school and you figure out something else. You know, I think people think we sleep in beds, but the truth is we sleep in the studio. We live in the studio, we live in the mirror, we live at the bar. It's very meticulous, it's very tedious, it's very perfect. And it's unfortunate because the human body isn't perfect, but we're constantly on this quest to be perfect. And once you get all that down, you still have to create something called art and create this magic within you to make the steps look effortless and light and easy. So, you know, I'm a vegetarian, doesn't look like it right now. I had a lot of baklava, it's very good. However, you know, I've been watching my diet pretty much most of my dancing career, and, you know, I'd say good 6 to 8 hours when you're training for something that you want to master and be the best you can at. So it's like any athlete, it's constant awareness of everything you do head to toe.
So in your careers, have you had the opportunity to speak to different groups of people, to have this type of conversation? If your impression of me is this, let me give you some insight as to what our day is like, what our world is like, how competitive it is. So have you been in a position where you've talked to students at schools of different levels, or the public, where you've sat down and said, look, this is our world. It's not all light and airy. It's very demanding.
It's funny because I remember in like 2nd grade we had parent show and tell day, and this kid's father came in with an eyeball, and I couldn't understand what he did, but he had an eyeball in this little jar. So I feel like sometimes when I talk to kids and I'm like, I'm a ballet dancer and this is what I do, they look at me like I looked at that guy with the eyeball.
Right.
But maybe they've had more success at explaining what they do to kids.
So if you came into that class in America today and said, you know what I do is I'm a break dancer,
Yeah.
and start from I'm a break dancer and work backwards.
Yeah, if only it were so simple. I mean, it's not until you stand up and you start gyrating their body and shaking them that they are probably confused. What are you doing to me? This is weird. And then you realize, well, that's breakdancing, and you can, you know, travel the world and spin on your head and do cool stuff. So I don't know. I'm sure there's a way to really get through to kids, but I think the only way is for them to experience, you know, their first class.
It's probably just visual as well, though, when they see it. I don't know. I found with myself and with my siblings.
Yeah, watch me. Come to a ballet. Come see Nutcracker. You know, experience the magic of it.
Well, I think also once you're able to be exposed to a higher level of it. I know for me and my siblings, like the first time I actually saw like a professional ballet performance at a high level, that's the moment that I was like, wow, you can do that with your life, that's amazing.
I think you had an acquired taste for high art. A lot of kids look at that and just like, tights? Who would want to wear those? And then like I have friends that I kept trying to give tickets to my shows to. I was like, here's some free tickets. And they're like, no, we're okay. And then I'd be like, yo, I wish I could hang out with you, but I got to go back to the studio. And they're like, you don't know what you're doing yet?
I see something going on up there. Please share.
But I think what's also interesting hearing you two and thinking back is the difference in telling people that you're a dancer from the male and female perspective and how that's perceived and delivered.
Stereotypically, yeah, the stereotypes, exactly.
Do you believe those stereotypes are still as strong today across a broad spectrum of talking about the U.S. as opposed to, say, 30, 40 years ago?
Ask any guy to name 5 athletes. Ask any guy to name 5 dancers or the last ballet they went to.
Mm-hmm.
So, girls, maybe they can
Yes.
Anna Pavlova, maybe they're lucky. They can at least name a ballet or an opera they went to.
So it's a matter of what you get exposed to. So from your 3 perspectives, I know time is getting short. I said I would ask any questions so far. Please.
It's less about taking in the end and more about giving. You know, inspiring the audience, inspiring your friends, your family. It puts food on the table. I have a family now, so it's real life. When you're a kid and you're just dancing, it's fun and games. But after a certain point, this is your livelihood, and you have to take it seriously, and you have to be more professional about it. So I think it became real life. Growing up, it became real life. It was not just a fairy tale. For me. Yeah, I mean, I grew up, you know, watching Muhammad Ali and Bruce Lee and all these great, you know, Michael Jordan, all these great athletes and people that I really enjoyed. And I listened to, you know, Rolling Stones and Aerosmith and U2 and these great bands. And I saw all this admiration and love for these groups of male people when they came together, whether it be football or soccer or basketball or baseball. Just magic would happen. Fans would go crazy and everyone would love it. It'd be amazing. So I was like, why can't I have like a soccer team of dancers? And we could travel the world and have a lot of fun. And luckily been to about 25 countries and had a great time doing it.
How much time
It
do we
was to
have
break
left?
down stereotypes at the same time, bring awareness to the male dancer, what they could. We danced to pop music. It was very, very exciting in 21st century, if you want to put it that way.
I've got to ask you, you've danced in front of so many princes, princesses, people of notoriety, but the one person that interests me is Jackie Chan. So tell us a little bit about you dancing. What was the circumstances that Jackie Chan?
We were on tour, and he came to watch the performance afterwards. He came backstage, and that was it. That was the experience.
Okay, so it wasn't that much then,
No.
right? Okay. We've got probably 4 minutes and 32 seconds left
That's
here.
10 questions. Come on, 10 questions.
So you want, please. We'll get right to you after this.
Wait.
Okay. So this panel discussion is how art breaks down walls, and I believe that breaking down walls means that you have to effectively come to where your audience is, rather than forcing what you have on them. You have to be where they are in some way in order to get them to really be receptive to your message. You have to bring it to them in a way that they're going to be able to see it, and as choreographers and dancers, do consciously make an effort to do that.
100%. You got to attract them before you can educate them. So maybe we want to do Spartacus or something that's very high art, Sleeping Beauty, but you know, they may not know what a plie is, a tendu is yet. So you got to do a lecture demonstration, talk to them about dance, talk to them about what is so interesting that you're doing, and then I think you can educate them from that point.
Any comments?
Well, I think, you know, there has to be a receptiveness there and a willingness on both sides. But if it's not there, then it's up to the artist in the creation process to try to get through and to make it relatable enough and to try different ways of delivering the message where it can speak to them and be meaningful. So yes, it would be a conscious process in the creation and in the delivery.
I just want to add, some artists are so amazing as choreographers that we've all worked with, we don't change anything. But they're at the top of their field, so we're just like, if you tell us to do this and the audience doesn't get it, that's their loss. Slowly, through experiencing that process, they'll get educated just by witnessing it and being in the same room with it. Other times, we'll take it upon ourselves to try to, not dumb it down, but try to make it more relatable.
Question, please.
So, Rasta, Bad Boys of Dance was such a brilliant idea, and so where do you see that going, like maybe in the next 5 years or developing?
I'd like little bad boy schools all over the country to focus on these children that need an outlet to focus their energy, channel their minds. I was also, when I was 18, diagnosed with being bipolar, so I'd like to have an outlet for mental health awareness through movement arts.
Yeah.
I know our time is truly seconds away. Anything that you want to say to your fellow Montanans, and as mentors, each of you as mentors, any last thoughts or messages, please? So, Maria? You thought you were done, huh? Sorry.
I guess I would just go back to probably what I said before of that. No matter where you're from and no matter what your background is, of course there's going to be certain limitations on it, but to not let that limit you, to go for it and to strive to find a way to make it happen. I think to a certain extent, if you just don't give up and if you just keep going, it's also what Rasta was saying, that eventually someone will recognize something in you, or it will be used, whatever it is that you're pursuing might be used in a totally different way. But I found that nothing I've ever done has been for waste. It might not have been used for what I thought it would be used for, but it's, you know, always gone towards something. So
Thank you. Jen?
Well, I think we've had the opportunity to discuss and bring forth several different messages and touch on so many wonderful things tonight, but I feel, if anything, is that the lasting memory should be that we're creating consciousness and awareness that the arts should be a vehicle to deliver and to be used in many different ways, and that creativity can speak and be expressive to everyone and not just a certain few.
I think a wall, trying to get back to the lecture topic, I think a wall is something that, you know, you put in your mind and you project it onto someone. Whether I can do this or I can't do this, is someone projecting their wall upon me. It's my choice to then accept that or to defy that and improve upon it and show them what my wall says and how I shouldn't listen to that wall. The second part is be kind to yourself and be patient and kind to children.
I want to say on behalf of all of us in Montana, we thank you, our honor and privilege to have had you here tonight.
Thank you.